You're watching the best clips from the Journey Within podcast with me, Shobha Rana. With this podcast, learn to take charge of your life and master your inner world. So, Trin, a little education time for us. Okay, as a cis woman, I have lived in a certain way. I've seen the world in a certain way. As much as I'm trying to understand and comprehend the new world that it is becoming now, and as much as I'm willing to understand that, there is still a lot of confusion around the whole community per se.
Yeah.
You know, I could understand till maybe LGB. Now
Sure.
this TQIA plus, right? So please help us understand the concepts of pronouns. Please help us understand gender dysphoria
Yeah.
and things around gender identity basically.
Right. So I think we as Indian society, we're very lucky and we're a little ahead compared to the West. Because when we read about Hindu mythology, for example, and we listen to stories from our grannies and whatnot, or even if we do a little bit of digging around with our temples and yada yada, you will see that our history and our mythology has a lot of references of trans people in particular, or gender variants, right? Like, for example, I remember reading about Shikhandi back in our, क्या बोलते थे, Bal Mahabharat Katha.
Correct.
In high school, I remember reading about Mohini, who is an avatar of Vishnu, right? And if we as a society can have examples of gender variance in our mythology, then we are definitely far ahead, right? I think that what people are slowly starting to understand is that we have always been around and we are only becoming more vocal right now. But to start from the very beginning, who is a trans person? Trans is short for transgender, right? It essentially means that you were assigned a particular gender at birth. आप एक gender में पैदा हुए थे. I was born a boy. I was assigned male at birth. And I always identified as a girl. I identified as something other than what I was given at birth, right? So that's what trans means. It's an umbrella term, right? Some of us identify as the opposite gender. Some of us identify as neither, right? And we call that non-binary. And of course, in Indian society, for like many, many, many decades and generations, we've had traditional communities of trans people that we call the Kinnar community or the Tirunangai community, depending on which part of the country you're from. So these are communities of trans people who have their own rituals and chosen families and systems of basically supporting each other, right? And they started because biological families would not accept us and they would throw us out.
Just disown. Yeah.
Right. So that is how people historically have found ways of surviving, right? So do I belong to the Kinnar community? No, because that's not my culture. I wasn't raised in that system. But just like you, I am a woman, but of a different history and a different experience, right?
Aren't we all though?
Right. And every single woman has her own history, has her own experience. Womanhood is so varied like that. And I would say that a trans woman is a woman of just a different experience. That's all.
Trin, how do we integrate social acceptance into our fabric of societies? Give me a few pointers here that how do we sort of educate ourselves more and be more accepting of the community?
I think pronouns and complicated words like gender incongruence, dysphoria, that's still far away. Teach your kids not to bully other people, yeah. Like teach your kids to tell them that blue is boy and pink is girl is not a thing. It starts at such a young age. I remember I used to buy
That's
the
why
Kinder
you're wearing
Joy.
blue today.
Why not?
Breaking the norms.
I used to buy the pink Kinder Joy because I liked it, whatever, as a kid. And I used to be, made fun of for that. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Like, gender is so ingrained. Gender roles are so ingrained in our society. And parents don't even realize that they're doing it. Like, isko Barbie khareed ke do, isko whatever, Hot Wheels khareed. It starts there, So I would say that when it comes to kids, don't impose your ideas of gender and stereotype and what a boy should do, what she should not do. Don't do that stuff. Let your sons cry. It's healthy. If your daughters want to do sport, let them do sport. Don't restrict what makes them happy. I think it starts there. If you, at your workplace, are seeing that there is a queer person or someone that might be queer, try and stand up for them wherever possible. If someone is saying a transphobic thing, a queerphobic joke, किसी ने किसी को छक्का बुलाया, say something, na? For us, it's very difficult. Because people will be like, wait, are you from that community? But you can always stand up and say something. Right. So I feel like there are many, many, many small ways in which we can actually be better as human beings. It's a really long, extensive conversation, but where do we begin? Start at home. Change always begins at home. बच्चों को सिखाओ, give them better sex education. If you're a teacher, teachers could be doing better at telling kids not to bully each other and just having some sensitization. At any workplace, right? It needs to start with anti-discrimination measures, sensitization, gender-neutral restrooms, gender-neutral insurance, the same coverage for same-sex couples. There's really lots that can be said about it. But पहले अपने घर पे तो शुरू करो. Talk to your people at home. And then we'll see, where to take it next.
Right.
And that is why I think representation in media is so important. Everybody has sat at home and watched TV together at some point, right? I think that the more people you see now on screen or in depictions of trans people, that will automatically change the way that people think. I first learnt about trans people from Amir Khan's show, Satyamev Jayate, right? Where there was this one episode I remember where there was Ghazal Dhaliwal. She's a screenwriter, also a friend now. She was the first time that my parents and we saw this one person living her life like anybody else. She was talented, she's living her life, her parents are accepting. And I think pehli baar for my parents, they were like, okay, if we give acceptance to her, then she can do anything that she wants. I think that's the power of representation.
You put it up so beautifully, Trin. Representation is really important in all areas and verticals, particularly in media. So, because in media, what we are essentially doing is we are telling stories. Through this podcast, what I'm doing is I'm telling a story. So you're telling a story, and stories have the impact to change the narratives. Stories can rebuild new narratives. Stories can really transform the world, right? And if you have a representation there, like with your role in Made in Heaven, things have now started to roll out for you personally and for the other people of the community. If things like these do happen and we see them frequently, then maybe we will also not, as cis people, we will also not be as, uncomfortable or phobic or whatever the word is for that, of meeting you. So from there, acceptance is, which should be the basic human right. It is sounding like a privilege right now. It's just so unfortunate to live a life where even something as basic as this, you have to sort of see or seek for as privilege.
Right.
Right. Trin, I also want to talk about healthcare per se for trans people. Like, are there policies which include your surgeries? Because I think if it is a right, or if it is the way of identifying as someone and living their life in comfort as a certain person is important for them. And it should be included in health policies also, as in these surgeries. I'm assuming they're expensive. I don't know. Yeah, right. So these surgeries, not everybody can afford it. And gender identification shouldn't be only for an elite class of people who can afford it and
absolutely,
stuff. So
absolutely.
Are there policies like that designed which cover the surgeries and which cover your healthcare needs, basically?
Right. So as far as trans people are concerned, our healthcare needs are usually of two kinds. Stuff that is related to gender affirmation, or basically, feeling comfortable in your gender identity and in your skin. And then there's, of course, other healthcare needs that everybody has. For a cold or for whatever other healthcare concern that any human being may have, trans people also have that, right? On both those fronts, it's always been an issue in medicine. As someone that's gone through her MBBS, I have seen how subjects like forensic medicine, gynecology, had outdated queerphobic, transphobic information in it, right? So much as there is a long way to go, there have been steps that have been taken as far as policy is concerned. For example, the Madras High Court, right? There was a case where 2 lesbian women had run away from home and were being harassed by their biological families. So Justice Anand, an incredible man, what he did is he reached out to a bunch of people from the community, including myself, to learn more. And when he gave his verdict, he also in his verdict directed the National Medical Commission to remove all of this old queerphobic stuff from these textbooks. So that's actually happening right now. So things are happening, and every state government, in fact, should have a trans healthcare policy. Karnataka does have one. Kerala has one, as far as I know. To what degree it's been implemented is questionable. But the Trans Persons Act and the Nalsa judgment, etc., they do lay down protections and coverage for trans people, but it's yet to be implemented by state governments.
Yeah, so it's there in maybe theory now, but in
Yeah.
practice, you yet
Yeah.
to see it really doing things.
And it's a lot more complicated than just coverage of a certain amount of money, because if doctors are not trained only, right? Because when it comes to gender affirmation, it's not just one surgery. It's quite an elaborate process for people that need it. First, you need to go to a psychiatrist. You need to have a certain number of sessions, get a gender dysphoria letter, right? What is gender dysphoria? It's the discomfort a trans person feels with their body or with the gender that they were assigned at birth, right? So first you need to get that letter. You need to go to an endocrinologist and get your hormone replacement therapy ka prescription. फिर 1 साल हो जाने के बाद you have surgery. So there's multiple specialties involved, right? So the psychiatry, dermatology for laser, endocrinology, general surgery, plastic surgery. So all of that infrastructure we don't really have in the country yet. So you have like scattered doctors doing things here and there in different parts of the country, but like working like a team for trans healthcare, that's not something I've seen in a lot of places. America that way, in Boston for example, they're far ahead. Some hospitals have full departments dedicated to trans people's healthcare. तो बहुत कुछ करना बाकी है अभी, if that makes sense.
But I'm happy that you and the people like you are raising their voice and are getting all of this into our consideration, because healthcare is such a basic need of every human, and it should be accessible to everyone irrespective of who or what they identify with, right?
I agree. I feel like, even if it's a small cough to this day, I'm a doctor, so I can handle it.
True.
But sometimes if there is something that's just not going away, if I feel like I need help, I get very scared. I shudder to go to a hospital, because, if you have to give your entire medical history to someone, zaruri nahi hai ki wo samjhenge just because they're a doctor, So now you can only imagine what the case is for someone who's on the streets, who doesn't have access to everything that I have. I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky. But for someone who doesn't have access, of course it's going to be harder. Like hospital के अंदर जाना ही मुश्किल हो जाता है भाई. Security guard तुमको ताड़ देगा वहाँ से. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's difficult on that level for so many people.
Very true, very true. But with, like you said, transgender law coming into play, at least in theory, I'm hopeful that things will change in practice also for the community, for everyone, because in the end, it boils down to humanity. If you're discriminating like this, you're not operating on a humane level, and that's just so wrong. Thank you for watching the clips. Watch the full video from the link in the description box. If you like our videos and content, make the comment section your friend. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. We will meet you in our next episode. Till then, master your inner world with The Journey Within by Shobha Rana.